Hello guys, how are you all? Welcome back to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Izuku awakened his powerful quirk the humanoid fox, Deku x Mina, part 2. So before we start, please go check out the author of this fanfic, Pilsen18th, link is in the description. Also subscribe to our channel, and like this video. So let's begin the video. Izuku felt sunlight hit his closed eyelids, and regained consciousness. He noticed he was on an unfamiliar bed, as well. Taking in the scent of the room, he concluded he was in some type of medical area. It could be a hospital room, as much as it could have been a nurse's office. Deciding he wouldn't get any answers just laying there, Izuku opened his eyes, and looked around, as he sat up. After adjusting to the light, he saw that he was correct. He was on a bed with what appeared to be a nurse's office, medical supplies littering the counters. How the hell did I get here? Kurama spoke up in his mind. Finally awake, I see. Don't worry about it. You're in the Yui nurse's office. An old woman by the name of Recovery Girl rushed to your aid after you collapsed in the exam. Her quirk allowed her to heal your mangled arm. That was an idiotic move, by the way. Izuku was a bit agitated at the comment. Well, what was I supposed to do? A second longer, and we would have been a green and pink pancake on the pavement. I didn't have enough chakra to save us either. Izuku was more frustrated that Kurama wasn't understanding that it was quite literally a life or death situation. I realized that, Kit. However, that boost of chakra that I gave you was more than you were able to handle by pouring it into a single attack. While you were lucky that by getting rid of it you avoided a rampage, you also put so much strain on yourself that you nearly destroyed your chakra points, as well as your arm. If it hadn't been for that nurse's quirk, as well as the boosted healing I give you already, you might not have been able to ever channel chakra through that arm again. This gave Izuku pause. The thought of losing the ability to use chakra in one arm would have proved to be an enormous handicap on him. While he was capable of weaving one-handed seals, it still would have set him back physically, as well as forced him to put more strain on his remaining arm when using. Alright, fine. Maybe it was a bit reckless. At least in the end I was okay, right? Suddenly, while thinking of his own well-being, his thoughts drifted to that of another. Wait, where's Mina? Izuku cursed himself for his outburst, as the door to the room immediately swung open, revealing All Might in his skinny form, wearing a yellow suit with black stripes, as well as a 3-foot-old woman in a nurse's outfit. What happened? Are you alright? All Might showed his clear concern for his pupil while the nurse seemed to contain herself much better. All Might then transformed into his muscled form. Despite your circumstances, you are, and will always be, a true hero. You proved that when you threw away any regard for your own safety, and went to save Ishido-san. A hero should always be ready to defeat evil. However, protecting the lives of the innocent should always remain your greatest strength. Protecting the innocent, and those precious to us. Always remember this, young Midoriya. I was at a loss for words. Partially because of the wisdom of his teacher's words. Partially because, for a moment, those words reminded him of what his mother had told him years ago before she. Izuku clenched his fist, as he calmed himself, refusing to show his emotions. Stop it. She's gone. You couldn't have done anything. The one responsible for her death is dead. There's nothing left to think about. Shaking the thoughts out of his head, Izuku looked at All Might. Yes, sensei. Determination filled his eyes. I won't let anyone else be hurt while I can help it. I'll be strong enough to protect everyone. All Might seemed pleased with his student's response before he transformed back into his scrawny form and began to take a letter out of his pocket. Here, we finished evaluating the exams while you were unconscious. I was going to have this delivered to your home in a few days along with the rest of the acceptance letters, but I think you've earned it. Needless to say, you passed. I think you'll be pleased with the results. Izuku was not surprised at the news, but was happy nonetheless. He ripped open the official-looking envelope, and a strange, coin-looking object fell onto his lap. Once he picked it up, a hologram appeared from the top side, playing a recorded message. The message thanked Izuku for his hard work in the entrance exam, and praised him for the overall skill he showed. After a heroic rant from the world's top hero, he was congratulated for passing the exam with flying colors. Hologram All Might then stepped to the side, and revealed the top 10 scores for the exam. Izuku started at the bottom, and read the scores going up. He subconsciously found himself looking for Mina's name, and felt slight disappointment at not seeing her name listed. Oh well, these are just the top 10. I'm sure she passed. Izuku continued up, stopping for a moment to see Bakugo's name in second place. The explosive blonde had a score of 77 villain points, and 0 rescue points, making him the only one in the top 10 to not earn a single rescue point. Not that this surprised Izuku in the slightest. His eyes then drifted to the top spot, and while he expected his name to be there, the points were what caught his attention. There, right next to his name, Izuku had 72 villain points and 60 rescue points. While his pride was a bit hurt at Bakugo beating him in villain points, the rescue points more than made up for it. In terms of total points, no one in the top 10 scorers came even close. Izuku has beaten Bakugo by over 50 points. All Might spoke up when Izuku saw his score. Yes, young Midoriya. Your rescue of Miss Ashido was one of the most heroic acts ever displayed in the entrance exam. The judges only seemed disappointed that they could not give you more hero points. You also set up a new UA record in terms of total points, by the way. Izuku soaked in the information before smirking. Bakugo is gonna blow his top when he finds out. Izuku then felt a mix of curiosity and unexplainable embarrassment. Did Mina pass too? All Might chuckled at this. Yes, young Midoriya, Miss Ashido passed, as well. In fact, I believe she will be in Class 1A with you. Izuku tried to feign ignorance and downplay his feeling. Ahem, cool, just wondering. We are friends after all. All Might and the nurse nodded, although neither of them were buying it, as they both had the same thought. Bullshit. Izuku began to stretch his limbs, making sure everything was all healed up. He then hopped off the bed and stretched his arms up as he cracked his back. Thanks for taking care of me, recovery girl. Thanks for the news, All Might. I don't suppose I can go now, can I? Tsukachi Nizan has probably had a heart attack at this point. The recovery girl simply nodded. As All Might spoke, don't worry about Tsukachi. He was actually here for a while before he was called by the chief of police. You've only been out for about 5 hours anyways. Even with recovery girl's healing, that was rather impressive. Thank your lucky stars for Kurama. Izuku smiled at the thought of his big brother being dragged out by several officers to go and report to his boss. Well, I'm gonna head home then. Are we training for the week? All Might sighed. Unfortunately, I have quite a few things to do before classes begin for the year. I won't be able to train for this week. However, I want you to be sure to keep up with Kurama's training and do some of your own at our usual spot. Your uniform should be delivered to your home in a few days. Be sure you're ready for classes next week. UA has been known for pushing even the most promising students to their limits. Izuku simply smirked. I'm not hoping for anything less. All Might gave a prideful smile towards his protege as Izuku left out of the window and made his way home. At Izuku's home, Izuku wasted no time when he got home. He made his way to the pantry and immediately broke out some of his instant ramen. Usually they were meant only for emergencies. However, Izuku felt that he had earned it. Deciding to check his phone and call his brother to let him know he was home, Izuku was surprised to see a message there already. Throughout his years of training and ignoring any distractions, Izuku hadn't exactly made any friends during his time at school. In fact, the only contacts saved in his phone were his brother's, All Might, and that of the ramen shop near their home. This message was from an unrecognized number. He then decided to read the message. Hey Izuku-kun, it's Mina. They wouldn't let me into the school with you, sad face. Something about needing clearance, or whatever. I stayed out there for a while, and met your older brother, as he was walking out. He told me you were gonna be fine, but I was still worried. Luckily he said he could give me your number so I could contact you when you were better. Anyway, I was hoping you could let me know when you recover. Izuku was hit with a wave of emotions, as the water for his ramen came to a boil. On one hand, he was touched, albeit a bit embarrassed, by Mina's concern for him. On the other, he was getting ready to destroy his older brother for giving the girl his number. In the end, he just sighed, and began to eat his now-cooked ramen. Deep down, he felt the tiniest bit of gratefulness towards his brother's decision. He texted Mina back. Izuku, hey Ashido-san. I'm completely better now thanks to the school nurse. Sorry for making you worry. I actually found out that we both passed the exam, so I suppose I'll see you in school, huh? He got a reply back within second. Mina, thank goodness. I was super worried after you collapsed like that, and we both passed. I'm not too surprised you passed. Thanks for letting me know. Hopefully we'll end up in the same class. By the way, you don't have to call me Ashido-san. You already saved my life, so I think we're a bit past that. I'd prefer if you call me Mina from now on. Anyway, glad to know you're okay. I'm gonna get some shut-eye, but we should definitely hang out sometime. Izuku, sure thing. However, I plan on training and whatnot this whole week to prepare for school. Hopefully we can hang out after school starts. Mina, you're no fun. Wink with a frown. I guess you're right though. I should get ready for this year too. Well, talk to you later Izuku-kun. Winky face. Izuku rubbed his temple. This is gonna be an interesting year. That much I can tell. Time skip. 1 week. Izuku was in front of the UAS massive entrance in his new uniform with his backpack slung over his shoulders. He took in the view of his new school and couldn't help but be impressed. The air itself felt different now that he was a student. He had a few minutes before class was to start, but risked being late if he waited any longer considering the size of the school. You plan on going inside anytime soon? I'm not really sure what you find so intriguing about the gate. Kurama's patience was running thin at his partner's antics. Usually he would simply rest in the boy's mindscape, without giving anything else any thought. However, this being Izuku's first day at UA, he had grudgingly decided to stay completely aware of their surroundings. Yeah, just taking everything in I guess. Now that he was there, He took the time to look back on his life up until that point. He'd likely gone through more than most of these students would go through for most of their lives. He decided to look at this as an advantage. Kurama had just about enough of waiting, and decided to get the boy moving, and have a bit of fun at the same time. Hurry up, kid. I bet that pink-haired girl you saved will be eager to see you. She'd likely like to thank her knight in person, as that nurse put it. The results were instant, as Izuku's cheeks were soon stained with pink. He began to walk inside. I doubt that. I only did what anyone else would have done in my position. Plus, she hasn't even texted me since she made sure I was still alive. Kurama felt the tiniest bit of guilt over the boy's current feelings. Don't be such a dramatic kid. I doubt anybody could forget someone that saved their life, especially considering the flashy method you used to do it. While he didn't receive a response, Kurama felt Izuku's mood improve somewhat. Izuku made his way into the school, and found Class 1A. He slid the door open, and was met with a room full of people he'd be spending the next 3 years with. He had mixed feelings at first. The most notable thing was Bakugo with a cocky look on his face, legs kicked up on his desk, while a tall student with glasses and dark hair, the one who'd been making a fuss at the exam, was lecturing the blonde on his apparent disrespect. Both looked over at him as he opened the door. While Bakugo's cocky look was immediately filled with rage, the tall one simply looked with what seemed to be an analytical look mixed with a bit of respect. The tall one quickly walked over, carrying an air of class with every step. Hello there. You are Midoriya Izuku, yes? I am Ida Tenya. It's a pleasure to meet you. As Izuku was identified by Tenya, the whole class looked up before erupting out of their seats. Every single one of them were bursting with questions. You're Midoriya Izuku. What kind of quirk do you have? How many robots did you take down? Is it true you almost died during the exam? Izuku was a bit taken aback. While he wasn't a stranger to attention, considering the amount of admirers he had at his old school, this was a new situation for him. Most people weren't this forward when they thought he was quirkless. While he was getting his thoughts together, the situation took another turn, as he heard a familiar voice. Izuku-kun. Mina appeared from the crowd, as she shoved her way to the, and promptly jumped towards him, giving him a bone-crushing hug. Izuku was caught off guard by the hug, nearly stumbling out of the door. He took a moment to identify the person in his arms. He felt his face rapidly heat up a bit when he saw pink hair and a pair of horns. Ashido-san? He knew the pink girl was in his class, but was completely unprepared for the greeting she was giving him. The class was suddenly struck silent. After a moment, Mina finally broke the hug, but kept her hands on Izuku's shoulders. It's Mina, remember? This caused them to remember that the girl he'd only known a week had indeed asked him to call her by her first name, a big step between people and their culture. Oh, right. Mina-san? He couldn't bring himself to drop the honorifics just yet. That simply felt too intimate. This caused Mina to put up a bit. Needless to say, it looked adorable. Alright, fine. You're pretty formal, aren't you, Izuku? She gave a coy grin at the nickname she gave him. Before Izuku could question the nickname, Mina spoke again. Sorry for not calling you all week. When you said you were gonna be training, I thought you wouldn't want any distractions. Actually, I decided to do some training of my own. She flashed him a smile bright enough to blind a person. It's alright. I appreciate it actually. He actually did appreciate her thoughtfulness. Part of the reason he never really made any friends was because he believed that it would be too much of a hassle to balance them with his training. Izuku decided to check on her well-being. I heard that you were healed by Recovery Girl. Are you completely alright now? That was a pretty crazy thing to go through during the entrance exam. Mina simply stepped back and did a quick twirl. Yeah, I'm completely a-okay thanks to Recovery Girl. Of course, the only reason there was anything left to heal was because my knight in shining armor came to my rescue. You really are an incredible Izuku. Izuku found himself mentally facepalming. Why is everyone calling me that? Before they could continue talking, a short student with dark purple balls in his head spoke up. Ah man, you're the top scorer, and you've got a smoking hot girlfriend? The boy continued to burst into exaggerated tears. Izuku, on the other hand, was preparing to shove down the shrimp's throat. His cheeks were on fire, and he struggled to look at Mina, who was no doubt mortified at the boy's words. When he did manage to look at her, however, he was surprised to see that she was looking at the floor, fidgeting, while her cheeks were stained with what appeared to be purple. If Izuku didn't know any better, he'd say she was blushing. Suddenly, the sound of a small explosion rang throughout the room, making everyone turn to see Bakugo with fury written all over his face. Will you all just shut the fuck up already? He then got up from his desk and stomped over to Izuku, who hardly flinched. Getting in his face, Bakugo shifted all of his attention onto the, how the fuck did a quirkless asshole like you pass the entrance exam? Huh? Tell me before I blow your ass into pieces. Bakugo's hand began to crackle as his anger rose. Izuku stared right back at Bakugo. As a precaution, he had already begun to channel earth chakra throughout his body. Calm down, Bakugo. If you need to know, it must be because I wasn't as quirkless as you thought. I did tell you I was aiming for the top spot, didn't I? Bakugo growled, and raised his fist, preparing to clean Izuku's clock. Izuku quickly thought of a better idea. Hold on, Bakugo. While I'm as eager to fight as you are, I don't exactly feel like getting into trouble on the first day. How about this? UA is a hero school, so we're bound to have some combat training. First chance we get, we'll have our fight. Then we'll see who's really the top dog around here. Bakugo took this into consideration. As bad-tempered as he was, Bakugo likely wouldn't want to throw everything away over a fight. At least not yet, whatever. Just be ready for me to kick your ass. I don't give a shit what your quirk is. Bakugo went back to his seat and kicked his feet up, a scowl on his face all the while. Before anything else could be said, a new voice was heard by the class. Will you all shut up already? Class is about to start. Izuku whipped his head to the open classroom door and saw that the newcomer was a grown man in a yellow sleeping bag on the floor. And you are? Izuku had decided to voice the question clearly on everyone's minds. The man looked bored as he responded, I'm your homeroom teacher. You will call me Aizawa-sensei from now on. Now this may be sudden, but put these on and get out onto the field. The man got out of his sleeping bag and pulled out what Izuku assumed was their gym uniform. Everyone nearly landed on their faces at the news that this strange man was their sensei for the next 3 years. Izuku, on the other hand, simply raised his eyebrows before shrugging and getting his own uniform. Definitely gonna be an interesting year. Izuku could only wonder what was in store for him as he went to the bathroom to change. UA field. Class 1A was on the field, all of them dressed in their perfectly fitted UA gym uniforms. Most weren't too surprised at the sudden instructions to meet on the field, as they had prepared themselves for the very different method of teaching UA was known for. Aizawa-sensei was standing in front of the students with a ball in his hand. Alright, listen up. We're going to take the physical examination now. However, this won't be like the ones you took at your old schools. This time around, you will be able to use your quirk however you wish to get the best possible results. The reaction was mostly positive as the students took in the news. It was rare they had the chance to use their quirks openly. It was also a chance to show off their quirks while checking out those of the rest of their class. However, whoever gets the lowest overall score will be judged as hopeless and will be punished with expulsion. Obviously, this destroyed the excitement that had filled the air a moment ago. Aizawa then held up the ball. The first test was how far you can throw this ball. Don't be afraid to let loose either. These are made to withstand a fair amount of punishment. He then held the ball up to Bakugo. Here, you can go first. Bakugo calmly took the ball and went to where markings indicated the throwing area was. After taking a moment more, he then got into a throwing stance and put all of his force into the throw die. Izuku facepalmed at the blonde's words. As he yelled, he added an explosion to the throw, rocketing the ball into the sky. The ball seemed to continue flying farther and farther away until it was a dot in everyone's vision. After a moment, a device in Aizawa's hand beeped and displayed a number. He then showed the screen to the class. The display read 705.2 meters, indicating the distance Bakugo's ball had traveled before it hit the ground. Most of the students were blown away by Bakugo's impressive distance. Izuku then raised his hand. Aizawa-sensei, may I go next? Bakugo shot him an irritated look while Aizawa looked like he couldn't care less. Go ahead. Izuku got his own ball and walked up to the throwing line. As tempted as he was to just give the thing his full power and blow it into the atmosphere, he decided to save his chakra for the rest of the test. Tossing the ball up, his eyes tracked the ball while he formed a somewhat small blue sphere above his right palm. Everyone stared in confusion at his actions, likely trying to decipher what his quirk could be. As the ball came back down, Izuku thrust his palm forward and slammed the blue sphere into it. Rasengan. The blue sphere immediately exploded outward when it came in contact with the ball, sending it soaring into the sky. After what seemed an agonizingly long time, the device in Aizawa's hand beeped, signaling that Izuku's ball had finally landed. The man then held the device up for everyone else to see. The screen very clearly read 795.4 meters. Everyone was even more impressed than with Bakugo, and Izuku had a somewhat disappointed look on his face when he saw the distance. I'm pretty sure I could have spared a bit more chakra for that. Aizawa seemed to look at Izuku's reaction with a hint of interest. Suddenly, Bakugo's voice startled everyone present. Izuku. Everyone looked over as Bakugo began to rush towards them with fury in his eyes. I'm gonna RIP your goddamn head OFF. Izuku wasted no time as he got into his Kage no Buki stance. Damn, I was hoping to avoid this until we could have some sort of combat training. Kurama, however, seemed excited at the idea of a fight. Don't I dare lose to that brat. Make sure you show him your superiority so he learns his place. Izuku rolled his eyes internally. At least try to act like you're against this. Right. As Bakugo was nearing Izuku, several, what appeared to be bandages wrapped around the blonde, restrained him. Would you pipe down? You're acting like a fool. The devices holding Bakugo led right to Aizawa, who was holding onto the ends. His long hair was flowing up, as if he was underwater, A pair of yellow glasses were wrapped around his neck, and his eyes were glowing red. Bakugo continued to struggle. What the hell? Why can't I use my quirk? After getting a better look at Aizawa, Izuku finally put the pieces together. Those glasses, that quirk, that capturing weapon. You're the pro hero Eraserhead, aren't you? As per Kurama's instruction, Izuku had done fairly thorough research on pros, their quirks, and their tactics. Eraserhead had the ability to erase quirks by looking at them. His signature glasses and capturing weapon were a dead giveaway. That I am. I don't exactly enjoy using my quirks so frequently. I have dry eyes, so knock it off. The 1A teacher had an intimidating demeanor that might have frightened the class had his statement not been so ridiculous. Bakugo had finally cooled off and stopped struggling. Aizawa let him go, deactivating his quirk. As he did so, Izuku rose from his combat stance and met with Bakugo's fierce glare. I swear I'm gonna kick your ass the first chance I get. Izuku only smirked at the statement. I'm ready when you are. He was positive he heard someone in the class mutter something about a battle between men, but decided to brush it off. The physical examination proceeded rather smoothly after that. True to his sensei's words, the physical examination was exactly like any other, but the use of quirks had greatly improved the results of many students. At the end of the examination, Aizawa showed the results to the class. Surprisingly, neither he nor Bakugo got the top spot, as first place was Yayorozu Momo, and second went to Todoroki Shoto. Izuku got third while Bakugo got fourth. While Izuku was more or less about his results, he was still sympathetic to the person that got last. At the bottom of the list was Mineta Minoru. Suddenly, the boy that had accused Mina and Izuku of being together suddenly broke down in huge, almost comedic tears. He fell to his knees and began to pound on the ground. No, expelled, but I just got here, and there are so many hot girls in this class. This isn't fair. A tick mark developed on Izuku's forehead. He was beginning to feel a bit less sympathetic for the pervert. Aizawa then revealed that the threat of expulsion was a lie. It was simply a way for him to get the best out of the students. While Izuku found the method to be a bit harsh, he did see the logic behind it. However, it still failed to get the best out of him. He only planned on going all out in combat training, or unless the situation desperately called for it. The rest of the day was fairly uneventful, as Izuku soon found out that, while UA was the world's best hero high school, it was still required to have regular high school classes, such as English, mathematics, and history. Luckily, the classes were significantly more difficult than those of his previous school, meaning he couldn't let his mind wander during class like he used to. One interesting factor to his classes was the fact that they were all being taught by professionals. He decided to take this as a chance to do more research on their quirks and tactics if given the chance. It was the next day that really got his attention. He was shocked when All Might himself was in class today. Hello, young students. Today, your teacher will be me. I have a special lesson planned for you all today. Nearly the entire class was ecstatic over the fact that the number one hero would be their teacher. Izuku was mostly unaffected. I wonder how they'd react if they found out he's been teaching me personally for a while now. They were instructed to retrieve their hero uniforms from the lockers within the classroom. While most everyone seemed excited at the statement, Izuku remained confused. Hero uniforms? As it turned out, everyone had been able to turn in a rough sketch of what they wanted their hero uniforms to look like. Unknown to Izuku, both Tsukachi and All Might had intercepted the forms to do so before he could get them. They decided to send in their own sketch. Urban Training Area. Class 1A had gathered at the designated urban training area, all dressed in their hero costumes. Many of them were admiring themselves and each other excitedly. Izuku, on the other hand, was doing his best, and failing to not gather any attention. He had an idea of who designed his hero costume. He looked over at All Might, who simply flashed him a smile and a thumbs up, confirming the greenette's suspicions. I'm gonna kill him. And Tsukachi Nizan. Izuku likely would have gone with a less flashy approach. He was wearing what looked much like his training suit. It was a mainly black outfit that had dark green lines running down his torso and legs, as well as along the sides of his arms. He had subtle black knee and elbow guards. He also had an optional metal face guard that was black at the base and turned into a dark green at the top, much like his hair. Izuku had no problem with the aforementioned aspects of his costume. He had disagreements with the final addition. The final piece of his costume was a flowing cloak that, despite appearances, was firmly attached to the rest of the costume once he put it on. He could release the clock with the click of a button, but a note on the outfit explicitly told him not to, as it was apparently made of a special material. Majority of the cloak was his signature dark green, but had what appeared to be black flames at the bottom. Izuku was firmly against capes, as they were mostly a hindrance in combat. The cloak on his costume was about as close to a cape as one could get. As Izuku prepared to ignore the warning and remove the cloak, he was approached by Mina. Hey Izuku, your costume looks so cool. Now I kinda wish I had put more thought into mine. What do you think? Izuku attempted to hide his blush as she showed off her costume to him. The first thing he noticed was the fact that her costume was skin tight. It hugged her body fairly tightly, leaving little to Izuku's imagination. The material was a very loud blue and purple camo design that started at her chest and went all the way down her legs. She was wearing a pair of sturdy-looking brown and beige boots. She also wore a snug beige vest that did little more than to cover her shoulders with some fluffy-looking material at the top. Izuku realized he was gawking at her and quickly cleared his throat. "It's kind of flashy, but actually I think it looks really good." Izuku nearly panicked at his words, that is to say that it suits you. Within his mindscape, Kurama was having a hoot, as his laughter echoed in his mind, "Shut up, will you?" Izuku's words did little to silence the laughter. Returning his attention to Mina, his eyes widened at seeing that she had a somewhat purple look on her cheeks, as her hand covered her mouth and was fidgeting her feet. Izuku groaned internally. She probably thinks I'm a creep for wording it that way. He didn't see that her hand was actually covering an uncontrollable grin that had made its way onto her face. As he prepared to apologize, Mina quickly spoke up, "Thanks Izuku. I was mostly going for a me type of look with my costume. You know what I mean? Anyway, we should probably go join the rest of the class. It looks like All Might Sensei is about to start the lesson. I really like your cloak, by the way. I think it really gives you a hero look." By the time she had finished speaking, Mina had lost the purple in her face and seemed to be completely back to normal. She cheerfully made her way to where the rest of the class had gathered. Izuku subconsciously grabbed onto his cloak. "I guess it does look kind of cool. Won't hurt to give it a try." Izuku shook the thoughts out of his head as he joined the rest of his class. All Might then proceeded to explain that day's lesson. It would be a simulation of villains having a doomsday device within their base. There would be 2 pairs in the exercise, 2 villains and 2 heroes. It would be the hero's job to infiltrate the base and reach the device by touching it, while the villains would try to make sure the heroes wouldn't reach it by the time limit. Participants could be incapacitated by being wrapped in capture tape, thus putting them out of the exercise. All Might then went on to choose from 2 boxes labeled hero and villain. It was decided that the hero team would be Izuku and a girl named Uraraka Achiko. The villain team would consist of Bakugo and Tenya. As both teams stood in front of the building that would serve as the villain's base, Bakugo shot Izuku with a sneer that promised he would crush him. Izuku decided to drop his usual calm demeanor and gave Bakugo a challenging look. After the villains headed inside, Izuku immediately turned to Achiko. "Hi there. Uraraka-san, right?" The girl seemed to be nervous as Izuku spoke. "Why yes. Nice to meet you, Midoriya-san." Izuku got a better look at her. She was wearing a black and pink outfit that was snug, much like Mina, although not nearly as revealing. He saw that she also had an attractive figure. She was wearing a type of visor on her head. Through it, he saw that she had a rather cute face with naturally pink cheeks, as well as brown hair that framed her face. Focusing his attention, Izuku responded, "Nice to meet you, Uraraka-san. If it's alright, I'd like to get right to the point. Would you tell me what your quirk is?" She seemed to relax a bit after his response. "Well, my quirk allows me to nullify the effects of gravity on anything I touch, including myself. I can also release the effects at will." Izuku rubbed his chin and thought, "I think I might have a way to use that." As he was about to elaborate on his own abilities, All Might's voice rang in their earpieces, signaling the start of the exercise. "My quirks are a bit strange, so I won't be able to tell you all the details right now. I do have a plan though. I'll need you to trust me for this, okay?" Achiko nodded in understanding. "Got it." Achiko was following Izuku as he led them via smell. Izuku was actually following Kurama's directions, as the fox was still able to use his senses to a far higher degree than he could. Izuku heard pounding footsteps coming towards them. "Brace yourself, kid. That Bakugo brat is heading towards you both." Izuku held his hand up, making Achiko stop Bakugo's coming. "Remember the plan?" Achiko nodded and took her place a few steps behind Izuku. A few moments later, Bakugo leapt into the hallway Izuku and Achiko were in. "Izuku!" He rushed at Izuku and immediately sent an explosion towards his face. Izuku ducked under the blow and grabbed onto Bakugo's extended arm. He then used Bakugo's momentum, as well as some earth chakra, to toss him down the hall. Just in time, as Bakugo had another explosion aimed at his back before the throw. Bakugo recovered quickly, as he used an explosion to right himself in midair, allowing him to land on his feet. After a moment, both students charged at each other at full speed, Izuku preparing a punch, Bakugo preparing an explosion. Right as they were about to clash, Izuku sent a spike of lightning chakra throughout his body, giving him a burst of speed. He narrowly dodged an explosion aimed at his face, but felt a burning pain on his cheek. Bakugo was caught off guard by Izuku's sudden speed. Izuku wasted no time, as he hooked both his arms under Bakugo's, and quickly placed him in a hold, keeping his arms up where he couldn't aim at him. "Uraraka-san!" Achiko quickly sprinted towards Bakugo, who was struggling to get free. Fortunately, Izuku had already sent earth chakra throughout himself, boosting his strength, holding the explosive blonde in place. Once Achiko reached them, she placed a firm palm on Bakugo's torso. Once she gave a nod to Izuku, he pretended to lose strength as his grip faltered, and he shoved Bakugo away from them both. Bakugo quickly checked himself for any change, and then returned his sneer towards Izuku. The hell was that? Is she trying to hurt me or something? Izuku didn't respond, as rushed Bakugo again, who began to reel his arm back for another explosion. Izuku quickly weaved hand seals. Once they were 3 feet apart, Izuku finished the seals, and slammed his palms on the ground while Bakugo was thrusting his glowing palms forward. Earth style, earth wall. Right before Bakugo's hands erupted, Izuku's took effect, as a wall made of rock emerged between the two of them. On Bakugo's side, he let his explosion loose, attempting to destroy the wall. However, as he did, the force of his own explosion sent him flying down the hallway until he hit the opposite wall at full speed. He landed on the ground, completely dazed. He hadn't realized that Achiko had removed the effect of gravity on his body, which kept him from being able to withstand his own quirk. Izuku smirked at the sound of Bakugo hitting the wall. He then turned to Uraraka, nodding, "Great job. Now, let's go stop that doomsday device and win this." Achiko gave an excited look before it turned to one of concern. "Midoriya-kun, your face. Are you alright?" Izuku gingerly touched his right cheek. He winced, and pulled his hand back, as his cheek stung at the touch. "Must be where Bakugo's explosion clipped me. Don't worry, it doesn't hurt that bad at all, and I can still fight perfectly fine. Let's get going, we don't have any time to waste." Achiko looked like she wanted to argue, but simply nodded, following Izuku, as he led the way. They soon reached the room where Tenya and the doomsday device was. Izuku's sweat dropped a bit, as the doomsday device was a giant bomb with a timer on it. They couldn't be a little more creative. "Are you ready?" Izuku turned towards Achiko. She offered him a silent nod, as she casually ran into the room. "Oh, Midoriya-san, I found the device." She pretended to speak into her earpiece. When Tenya whipped his head around, Achiko immediately put her hands over her mouth. Oops. Tenya then went on to put up a very humorous villain act, as he referred to Achiko as hero, and went on to talk about how he prepared for her arrival by removing any obstructions that would have kept him from using his speed unhindered, as well as anything she could have used to make float. Izuku had to admit, Tenya was clearly more prepared than Bakugo. Not that it was a hard thing to accomplish. If Bakugo hadn't been so focused on Izuku, he might have remembered the specifics of Achiko's quirk like Tenya had. Achiko then rushed towards the device, but Tenya speedily moved it out of the way before she could touch it. Achiko continued this charade, drawing Tenya's attention to the opposite side of the room. While Tenya was giving an evil laugh and telling Ochako that her efforts were all for naught, Izuku casually walked over while forming hand seals and cast his. He then placed his palm on Tenya's back, lightning style, stun impulse. Tenya immediately collapsed as his muscles locked up from the shock. What? How? I thought you were fighting with Katsuki-san. Izuku shrugged. That was the plan. I knew Bakugo would rush off on his own. All we had to do was incapacitate him for long enough that we could work together to deal with you. He and Achiko then walked over to the device and placed their palms on it. Hero team wins. All Might's voice boomed over the intercom throughout the fake city. Izuku then turned to Tenya, who was shakily getting up. Don't worry, I didn't put too much power into that move. You may feel a few cramps for a bit, but you'll be fine. That was a smart tactic, by the way. You knew Bakugo would target me, and assumed that I'd be busy fighting him while Achiko found the device. You prepared the environment to put her at a disadvantage, as well as giving yourself an advantage. If we hadn't come up with a plan to deal with Bakugo in advance, I'm fairly sure you would have been able to win. Tenya then stood to his full height, and faced Izuku and Ochako. I appreciate the compliment. However, your plan was perfect. You used your knowledge of your enemy to your advantage, and even had a way to make me drop my guard. Thank you for this. It was definitely a learning experience. I don't plan on losing next time though. He gave Izuku a friendly smile. Izuku returned the smile. Either do I. Before anything could be said, a huge explosion could be heard, and a slight tremble was felt throughout the building. Fucking goddammit. Izuku, I'm gonna kill you. Everyone's sweat dropped at the sound, and Izuku spoke up. I think Bakugo is back on his feet. Achiko began to laugh, and was soon joined by Izuku and Tenya, back with Class 1A. And All Might. Izuku had a bandage on his face, as well as some ice. He had declined the pass to the nurses' offices, knowing he would heal on his own soon. He was more interested in seeing the rest of the battles. He made sure to take note of everyone's quirks and tactics. The one that really caught his attention was Todoroki Shoto. The white and red-haired teen had hardly said a word since the year had started. Izuku watched with interest, as Shoto ordered his teammate to wait outside after he had identified where in the building the villains were. The stoic teen then continued to place his palm on the building, and froze the entire building, including the room where the device was. Then, without looking tired whatsoever, he casually walked to the Doomsday device and placed his palm on it, winning the exercise far faster than anyone else. Izuku had rarely seen anyone with such an impressive quirk. He was even more impressed when Shoto then melted the ice at will. So, he's got a powerful ice quirk, as well as likely having some type of heat or fire quirk. He definitely can't be ignored. He and Bakugo are likely my biggest competition strength-wise. I only beat Bakugo because I had a plan with Uraraka-san. It took all I had just to avoid his attacks. I doubt he'd give me the time to comfortably cast in a one-on-one fight. Izuku was shaken out of his thoughts when Mina approached him. Izuku, are you sure you don't want to go to the nurse? That wound looked pretty painful. Concern filled Mina's eyes that immediately gave Izuku a warm feeling in his chest. He was happy for her concern, but guilty for causing it. Don't worry, Mina-san. This will heal up in no time, and I really want to see the rest of the matches. My quirk actually helps me heal faster than normal people. I'll be fine in less than an hour. No scar or anything. Mina immediately brightened up, but she still felt worried. Really? That's a pretty handy quirk you got there. But I'm still gonna check it in an hour. If there's even a trace left, I'm dragging you to the nurse. Izuku chuckled. Sure thing, Mina. Mina's cheeks turned a tinge of purple when she heard Izuku. He hadn't realized that he had completely dropped the honorifics when he said her name that time, something that was usually a sign of closeness between two people, especially between those of the opposite gender. Clearing her throat and trying to get over her embarrassment, Mina spoke again. Hey, are you free anytime this week? Izuku's heart thumped in his chest when he heard her words. Not really for this week. I have some special training I need to get done. Izuku thought about his schedule with all might, and Kurama. His heart nearly shattered at Mina's disappointed look. But I should be free this weekend if that's alright. Do you want to hang out or something? A smile quickly made its way onto Mina's face. Yeah, I was hoping to get a few of us together and go hang out sometime. You know, we're gonna spend the next 3 years with each other, so we might as well be friends. Izuku felt the slightest bit of disappointment when he heard there would be others with them, but decided to ignore it. Sounds good. Just text me and let me know the details. I'm free pretty much all day on Saturday, and I can make some time on Sunday if I have to. He was thankful that All Might had become more lenient with weekend training once the school year started. He had begun giving his successor Saturdays off, and Sunday was usually negotiable. Mina smiled even more brightly. Great, it's a date then. She then became a bit purple again. Not like a date. I mean, like it's settled. Izuku also developed some color in his cheeks. Right, of course. I got it. Both teens decided to not speak another word as they went back to watching the matches and avoided looking at each other. Stupidly wide grins had formed on both of their faces. Izuku was sitting in class, fairly engaged, as President Mike taught them a somewhat difficult lesson in English class. The usually loud and excited hero seemed like a completely different person during academic lessons. In short, he seemed more like a regular person. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the school, startling more than a few students. Izuku was surprised, as well, but wondered what could possibly call for an evacuation. UA's got enough security in place to make even the toughest villains shit their pants. It's gotta be a fire or a quirk misfire or something. Kurama agreed, but still wanted to remain cautious. You were probably right. But remember what I taught you. Assumptions and overconfidence can lead to the downfall of even the mightiest beings. I remember. Just thinking out loud, I guess. Or am I? Does this count as speaking? Izuku was now genuinely curious as to whether or not his talks with Kurama counted as speaking. Kurama simply faced his partner's stupidity at that moment. Deciding to leave it for another day, Izuku quickly got up to follow the rest of the students out of the class. Unfortunately, the hallways were soon flooded with panicking students who had apparently thought that the building was coming down as they pushed and shoved their way to the exits. This only slowed down the evacuation, as everyone slowed each other down. Izuku soon got a look out of the window to his right and saw a mob of reporters with their camera crews coming through the gates. Are they the cause of the alarm? Are you kidding? Anybody that gets on UE property without clearance or permission is likely treated as a threat regardless of how ridiculous it may be. Kurama was also annoyed to find out the cause of the panic. It simply showed incompetence on the UA's part in his eyes. These idiots probably don't even realize the cause even though it's staring at them from the window. Izuku referred to the students as another bumped into him. Just as Izuku was determining how to tell the students there was nothing to worry about, he suddenly saw Tenya floating in midair. Izuku's confusion was answered when he saw Ochako near where Tenya had begun floating. Tenya then used the engines on his legs to propel himself down the hall, and was about to shout over the terrified students. Izuku decided to give him a hand, as he quickly began to weave hand seals, fire style, flare shots. Izuku then blew several harmless, but easily notable fireballs into the air above the students, quickly silencing them. Hey, shut up, and listen already. Izuku points towards Tenya, who was still floating in the air. Tenya looked towards Izuku and gave him a gratitude-filled look before speaking. It's alright everyone, we are not in danger, just look outside. Please remain calm and make your way towards the exit. All of the students turned towards the windows and saw the mass of reporters attempting to get past the UA staff. Obviously it was a fruitless endeavor. Once they realized they were not in any danger, they all followed Tenya's instructions and made their way out of the school with little issue. After everyone was outside, they gathered by their respective classes and waited until the staff and police had successfully restrained the press and taken off of the premises. Once all of the fuss had died down, everyone found themselves back in their classes, now homeroom since the incident had taken up a bit of time by then. After Aizawa was done speaking and told them to study hall, in the meantime Izuku stood at the front of the class, clearing his throat to gain their attention. I would like to step down as class rep and have Ida-san take my place. Most of the class looked at him with confusion at his unexpected request. Izuku has gotten the most votes out of everyone by a significant margin. Many people that didn't choose themselves claimed they picked him because of his results of the entrance exam, as well as what they saw during All Might's first training exercise. Izuku was a bit surprised, but understood their reasons for choosing him. It wasn't like he was eager to be the class rep, but if the class thought he was the best suited for the role, then he would be sure to meet expectations. However, seeing Kenya's response to the situation during the evacuation, as well as his few interactions with his bespectacled classmate, had left him with a good impression. Frankly, he seemed like he already had the traits necessary for a class rep. He then began to explain his reason. We all saw what he did during the evacuation. He acted before I did, and managed to calm everyone down without adding fuel to the flames. Even before that, I'm sure we all can agree that Ida-san is a model student. Everyone was nodding their heads as they saw Izuku's point. Surprisingly, the one person that seemed against the idea was Tenya himself. Wait, while I am happy for your confidence, Midoriya-san is clearly the better option. He is the top student far, has a level head in any situation, and has already proven himself in any way a student could within the first 2 weeks of school. Izuku wasn't so modest as to deny what Tenya had said about him. He still stood by his decision. The class rep doesn't exactly have to be the top student, Ida-san. If you want to talk about level-headedness, then your handling of the chaos in the halls was proof enough, as well as your quick thinking. Plus, as I said before, you have already shown what a model student you are. Believe me, I'm not trying to shove the responsibility away. I just feel like if anyone deserves to be class rep, it's you. Tenya opened his mouth to object, but found he couldn't speak. Soon, the other students began to raise their voices, shouting support for Tenya. Tenya looked like he had won an award very well. If you all believe in my ability to act as class rep, then I will not fail to meet your expectations. He then bowed to everyone as they began to clap for him. Izuku simply smirked as he sat down. He'll definitely do a better job than I ever could. Izuku then decided to take a breather and relax for the remainder of school. Time skip 4 days. Class 1A was on a bus headed for another field exercise of some kind. They all had their hero suits on, and everyone seemed excited at the chance of getting to hone their quirks and skills. Izuku was seated between Tenya and Mina while Achiko was next to Mina. Shortly after the whole class rep ordeal, Tenya had approached Izuku and very properly requested to be his friend. Of course, Izuku said that it was fine. He had actually come to respect Tenya's work ethic, as well as his drive to be a model example for the class, as what a student at UE should be. While he was often a bit too formal and strung up, Izuku accepted that as part of his personality, and didn't give it too much thought. Achiko had also become Izuku's friend by that time, although it was a much more natural occurrence than it had been with Tenya. She had been a bit nervous to approach Izuku, likely because of his high standing in the class despite the year just starting. He simply did his best to show her that there was nothing to fear, and that he wouldn't mind conversing with her. Mina, while friendly to everyone in general, often found herself drifting towards Izuku. Thus, Izuku soon found himself with a close group of friends. Mina was incredibly excited after they were instructed to put on their costumes. Oh man, I can't wait to get there. I still can't believe that we are being taught by All Might, as in the All Might. Mina's excitement quickly rubbed off on Achiko, who turned out to be pretty outspoken herself once she was used to the class's atmosphere. I know, right? He's so cool in person. We're going to be the best heroes ever after getting taught by All Might. Achiko sent a few jabs in the air with a serious look on her face during her last statement. Tenya seemed to be happy about All Might being at UA as well. I agree. The possibilities of being taught by the one praised as the world's greatest hero are countless. We must not let this opportunity slip. We must remain vigilant in our studies. He had gotten lost in his passion, and was now standing with his fist clenched. Mina and Achiko giggled at Tenya's antics while Izuku smirked. It took all of 1 hour for them to get used to Tenya's strange habits. Mina then turned to Izuku. What about you, Izuku? How do you feel about having All Might as a teacher? Izuku would usually have just said it was fine, but he didn't want them to be suspicious of an unenthusiastic answer. That, and Mina was in her hero costume. He found it to be quite distracting. Well, it's pretty exciting. I take my training pretty seriously, and having All Might as a teacher is sure to help out with that. Yeah, don't push yourself too hard though. There's such a thing as too much training, you know. You need to make sure you have a bit of fun every once in a while. Speaking of which, don't forget to meet us tomorrow. We're gonna go out and have fun for the first time as a group. Mina grew an extra wide smile as she reminded the group of their Saturday plans. Izuku also found himself getting excited. This would be the first time he's ever gone anywhere with friends. I got it, Mina-san. I'll be sure to be there, so don't worry about it. He tried to play down his excitement as he spoke. Mina had intended to invite as many people from their class as she could, but settled for Izuku, Tenya, and Achiko since they were the closest at the moment. Izuku didn't have much of a problem with it. He still wasn't sure about a huge outing at the moment. In the back of his mind, he was simply worried that the more people there were, the less time he'd get to spend with his close friends like Achiko, or Tenya or Mina. Just as they were about to continue their conversation, they felt the bus stop, and Aizawa spoke up. All right, we're here. Don't do anything stupid, and follow directions. All Might Sensei is running a bit late, but should be joining us soon. Izuku was a bit worried that All Might had gone past his limit, and couldn't run late as a result. Still, Aizawa did say that he would be there soon, so it was likely not an emergency. Within a minute, all of Class 1A had exited the bus, and were now standing in front of a person wearing what looked like an astronaut's space suit. Izuku immediately recognized the hero, 13. The space hero specializes in rescues. 13 seemed pleased at how quickly the student caught on. That's correct. Welcome, class, to the unforeseen simulation joint. However, everyone just calls it the USJ for short. Please come inside so we can begin. 13 turned around and led the class into the massive facility. The class stared in awe at what they witnessed inside. The inside was huge, as it housed dozens of different environments to train in. There was a yacht in the middle of a lake, what appeared to be a mudslide, a collapsed building, and dozens more. 13 then spoke to the class. This facility is meant to simulate a multitude of different scenarios that you might encounter on the field. As heroes, you never know where or when danger could strike, and should strive to prepare yourself mentally and physically for as many different situations as possible. Izuku was getting more excited with every word. The only environments he'd fought in up until that point were in the city and the forest for training. This place would give him the chance to spice up his training, and maybe give him some ideas for some new things that could be helpful later on. Suddenly, Izuku heard a faint and unfamiliar noise that caught his attention. The only other person that seemed to hear it, as well, was Aizawa, as he too looked towards the sound which seemed to be coming from the large plain area in the middle of the facility. Izuku tensed up while Aizawa scowled when they saw the source of the noise. It seemed as if a tear was being made in the middle of the field. The tear then became wider and wider, until it appeared to be a large smoky mirror made of oil. Aizawa quickly sensed the danger of the situation. Everyone got back, circled together, and don't move. Everyone was shocked at the sudden change in their teacher, but complied, grouping up closer to one another behind Aizawa and 13. After a moment, a hand reached out of the portal and seemed to pull its owner out. A man slowly emerged. He had pale blue hair and a mostly black outfit. The one peculiar thing about him was the fact that a mask shaped like a hand was covering his face, only revealing bloodshot eyes. He also had several sets of hands that were clamped on his neck, arms, and torso. Following the blue-haired man, a hulking, dark blue, humanoid-looking thing stepped out. He was even more massive than All Might's hero form. He had several large-looking scars on his upper body. All he wore was a pair of khaki shorts and skull-shaped knee guards. His head was what really made him look strange. He had a brain, as the top half of his head where his eyes were located, and a beak filled with sharp teeth as a mouth. After they both exited the portal, they were followed by dozens of people of varying shapes, sizes, and quirks, villains. Izuku muttered under his breath. He had stayed close to everyone, as Aizawa instructed, but remained near the front. After the portal closed, another villain was left standing with the blue-haired man and the behemoth. Apparently the one responsible for the portal was a man that seemed to be made of dark purple smoke. He had bright yellow eyes within the smoke, but nothing else indicated that he had shape or form. Izuku quickly analyzed the situation in preparation for a fight. It seems like hand faces, bird brains, and smoke are the biggest threats. I'd bet that the big one is their muscle while smoky is their exit. That leaves the hand face as being the one in charge here. The rest are likely common thugs to be used as cannon fodder. Kurama, now fully awake, agreed with the analysis. I would watch out for the big one. He seems to be radiating power. I suggest that you avoid provoking those three until reinforcements arrive. I don't want to take any chances with them with the little amount of information we have at the moment. Izuku nodded and began to step forward before Aizawa stopped him. Don't even think about Midoriya. While I understand how skilled you are, as well as the amount of battle experience you seem to have, I need you to stay here." Izuku was preparing to argue, but Aizawa continued, "Regardless of your talent, to me, and the rest of the staff at UA, you are a student. That means that your safety comes first and foremost. You are not to engage any of the villains unless absolutely necessary. That's an order." The words sunk in like a rock in water. He looked back at the other students. He realized that he forgot that not everyone had gone through what he had up until that point. He's been ready to jump in and fight without thinking of the others who'd likely never faced off against a shoplifter, let alone actual villains. Izuku had been numb to the fact that many of his fights with villains were easily life or death situations. Aside from Bakugo, Shoto, and a boy with spiky red hair named Kirishima, every student seemed struck with anxiety or frozen by fear. His eyes landed on Mina, and saw that she was already looking directly at him. She was very much afraid. On instinct, she looked at Izuku, who was the most capable person she knew. He realized that if he had left her then, and there, and they were attacked by villains, she likely wouldn't have been capable of defending herself. She could have gotten hurt. Izuku wanted to punch himself for his thoughtlessness. He turned back to Aizawa, and gave a determined look. "I understand." Aizawa nodded before turning to the mask of the face who'd begun talking. "Where's All Might? I don't have time to waste with low levels like you. I want to get straight to the main boss." A tick mark developed on Izuku's head, but he stayed silent. He wanted to stall for reinforcements, as long as possible. Of course, Bakugo was a bit more vocal with his feelings. "Low level. Why don't you bring your scrawny ass over here, and I'll show you who's the low level." Izuku resisted the urge to smack the blonde behind the head. Hand-Face just started to laugh. "You seem like you would be fun, but still, you're not All Might." He then turned to his mob of underlings. "You all can go, by the way. I can't wait to see All Might's face when he sees that we killed all of his precious students." His voice was filled with disgusting pleasure, as he giggled like a child. The villains began to laugh, as they made their way towards the students. They believed that taking on a bunch of heroes in training would be child's play. Apparently, they forgot about the two pro heroes standing in their way. Aizawa wasted no time, as he put on his signature yellow goggles, and took a hold of his captured weapons, and rushed down the stairs at the mob of villains. A group of them lined up in the front, and readied their quirks at the hero. Izuku realized that their quirks were ranged, as the frontmost one aimed his fingers towards Aizawa. However, Aizawa's tendency to work in the shadows away from the public eye proved useful in this fight, as none of the thugs were aware of his identity or quirk. This proved true, as they looked in confusion when their quirks refused to activate. The first few villains were taken down in seconds. Aizawa sent his fist crashing into the first one's face before moving to the next few who were still struggling to activate their quirks. He leapt over them, allowing his capture weapon to hang low, as he entangled them before slamming them into a few of their comrades. Then, a large villain with 4 arms rushed forward. He believed he would fare better, as mutation quirks such as his own were immune to Irazion. Aizawa soon proved that he wasn't limited by his quirk's drawbacks. He ducked under a large swing of his opponent before putting his full force into a strike into his face. He then sent his capture weapon to the now soaring villain, wrapping it around his foot, and bringing him down, slamming him into another group of villains. Aizawa continued like this, erasing villains' quirks, and dominating them in hand-to-hand combat, using his capture weapons to send his enemies into each other, and using his agility to dodge the few mutation quirk users before dealing with them, as well. Izuku couldn't help but stare in awe at his teacher's skill. While Izuku was very proficient in hand-to-hand combat, if it was a one-on-one without powers, Izuku didn't have much of a problem saying he couldn't best Aizawa. Suddenly, the villain shrouded in purple smoke vanished, and reappeared behind the group of students. 13 quickly rushed to get in between the students and the villain. He teleported as soon as Aizawa blinked. He must have been trying to use his quirk this whole time. Does that mean he knew who Aizawa-sensei was from the start? Izuku was cut out of his thoughts when Bakugo and Kirishima rushed at the villain. Wait! Izuku was ignored, as both leapt at the smoke, Bakugo delivering a devastating explosion, while Kirishima used his hardening quirk and threw a powerful punch. Just as Izuku was beginning to think that their rashness had actually paid off, the smoke cleared, revealing a completely untouched villain. The villain spoke before acting foolish. Suddenly the smoky substance began to spread outward towards the students. A few of them attempted to shield those who didn't have quirks that could do it themselves. Izuku found himself desperately looking for Mina. He saw that Shoji, a large student with 6 arms and white hair, was protecting her, as well as several other students. She locked eyes with him. Izuku. He realized he had gotten distracted, and a portal had appeared behind him. Shit! Izuku quickly rushed away from the portal with chakra-enhanced movements, only to be caught in another portal right in front of him. The last thing he saw was Mina, horror written all over her face. In the next moment, Izuku found himself free falling into the yacht and lake environment. He quickly righted himself in the air, and landed on the water, using chakra to keep himself above it before standing upright on it. The water walking he learned with Kurama held the same principles as wall walking, but it took significantly more chakra control, as he needed to actively keep the water together at his feet to avoid falling in. Shit, I need to get back there. The only real line of defense against a guy like that is 13, but he's a rescue hero. He doesn't have enough combat experience to last long in a real fight. Izuku knew that 13's quirk, Black Hole, was an incredibly powerful quirk that might work against a nearly shapeless opponent like that. Hurry up then, Kit. Your wind might work on him. You should try a few flashes. I think it would be worth checking how the different natures affect him. Izuku nodded. As he prepared to run back to the entrance where most of the class remained, his instincts kicked in, as he dodged to the right. A moment later, a villain burst out of the water at the speed of a bullet. Ah, stand still, small fry. Izuku grit his teeth at the words. One thing that got to him quickly was when people assumed he was weak. He looked towards the yacht, and saw that a dozen other villains were surrounding the boat. Taking a closer look, he saw that 2 of his classmates had also landed in the area with him, and had taken refuge on the boat. Izuku then went through a flurry of hand seals before placing his palm on the water's surface, lightning style. Stun impulse. He sent a much larger amount of chakra than when he had used it on Tenaya. The water acted as a conductor, and shocked every villain. The water itself sparked with electricity for a few moments before he ended it. After a few seconds, a dozen limp bodies floated to the water's surface. Izuku quickly grabbed each of the villains and tossed them by the shore. While they clearly had water-related quirks, he wasn't sure if they could all breathe under it or not. He may despise villains, but he would avoid killing if it could be helped. After he tossed the last one out of the water, he quickly ran to the yacht. He saw that the 2 that had been teleported there with him were Mineta Minoru, the shorty with purple balls on his head, and Ajiri Tsuyu, a green-haired girl with a frog mutation quirk. Are you 2 alright? Mineta-san? Ajiri-san? Mineta immediately began to shed tears. We're still alive. Tsuyu was much more composed. Thank you, Midoriya-kun Ribbit. Call me Tsu, by the way. Izuku tilted his head to the side in confusion, but decided it wasn't a big deal. Alright then, Tsu-san. Anyways, let's get out of here. We need to get back to the others, and help them from that teleporter villain. Just as Tsuyu was about to leap off of the boat, Izuku stopped her. Tsu-san, hold on. Don't touch the water. I haven't tried that technique in water before, so I don't know if my electricity is still affecting it. Tsuyu took a look at the water, and then towards the shore. Unfortunately, I don't think I am able to make such a jump. Do you have another way? Izuku nodded. I'll carry you both to the shore. My own techniques don't really have much of an effect on me, and I can walk on water. He then went over and picked up the Tsuyu bridal style. He looked at her apologetically. I'm really sorry about this, but I need you to bear with it for a bit. Izuku turned to Mineta, hurried, and climbed on my back. Mineta fumed. Why don't we both get on your back or something? Because you're a pervert, and I don't want you trying to take advantage, and groped Tsu-san. He kept a straight face, letting him know he was dead serious. Mineta looked more frustrated about being caught. Every guy is a pervert on the inside. He continued to mumble, but climbed onto Izuku's back. Izuku then hopped off the side of the boat, and started to run towards the shore. Luckily, Tsuyu weighed little, and Mineta was barely over 3 feet tall, so he had no trouble carrying them over the water. When we get to the shore, I want you both to stay a bit behind when I go for the teleporter. Don't engage him no matter what. If I can, I'll try to blow the entrance open so everyone can escape. Tsuyu understood, but was a bit against the idea. I understand that the situation is dangerous, Midoriya-kun, but is now really the time to go solo? We have a better chance of success if we attack together. Izuku simply shook his head. Neither of your quirks seem like it would be too effective against him. I still need to confirm if he has a solid body in the first place. On the chance that he doesn't, I'm still one of the few people here that may be able to damage him. He then looked ahead, not making eye contact. Regardless of the details, I won't let anyone get hurt if I can help it. Tsuyu looked at him with interest and concern. She was starting to suspect that Izuku had a much deeper reason for wanting to protect those around him. They then reached the shore, and Izuku put Tsuyu down. Alright, on land, you should be able to keep up with me. I'll carry Mineta-san since his quirk doesn't enhance his speed. Mineta grumbled at this, but decided not to argue. They made their way to the entrance, keeping a low profile to avoid detection from any of the villains. Passing the fight between Aizawa and the main mob of villains, Izuku saw that his teacher was still doing fairly well. More importantly, the hand face and bird brain were still watching from the back. Good. They seemed to be satisfied watching Aizawa-sensei fight their underlings. Still, he can hold off against those numbers, and be ready to fight 2 powerful villains on his own. Once I make sure everyone's safe, I'll come back and help him. Izuku would be sure to support his teacher once his classmates were out of danger. He climbed up to the entrance, choosing to avoid the main steps that led to his class. Tsuyu kept pace with him, as she was also able to climb fairly well. Once they got near the entrance, They saw 13 using his black hole quirk to keep Smokey at bay. You two stay back here. 13 is doing fine now, but that fight is a stalemate at best. 13's a hero, and won't attempt to kill Smokey. The same can't be said for the villain. Sia seemed like she wanted to argue, but simply nodded in response. Izuku quickly dashed closer until he was facing Smoke from the side. He then began to weave hand seals, lighting style, taser cable. A bolt of electricity shot out of Izuku's hand and went straight towards the villain. They made contact with the villain before he could react. 13 cut off his quirk once he saw Smoke light up with electricity, his smoke nearly dispersing, revealing he indeed had a solid body that consisted of a piece of metal below where his glowing eyes were. He screamed in pain, as he was shocked. Izuku cancelled once he saw the villain collapse, and Kurama spoke. That did come in handy, didn't it? Izuku rolled his eyes, although the fox was right. Kurama had forced him to develop a much like his lightning circuit that would be meant to be used on one opponent instead of many. The result was that it took significantly less chakra and control, as it was a much more straightforward move. He ran to his class. Are you guys alright? Was anyone hurt? Fortunately, everyone seemed to be alright, although a few people weren't there. 13 was the first to get over his shock. Midoriya-san, thank you for the assistance. All I was able to do was hold him back. I'm not sure what I would have done if they had sent reinforcement. Izuku shook his head. It's alright, 13-sensei. I'm just glad I could help. But where's everyone else? 13 looked down in shame. Unfortunately, a few of the students were teleported like you were. If you're here, then I'm assuming they were sent somewhere in the USJ as well. Izuku was a bit relieved. That's actually good news. From what I could tell, they know nothing of our quirks, considering they sent Susan, who has a frog quirk, to a place with water where she would actually have an advantage. Also, judging from Aizawa-sensei's fight, most of these villains are little more than common thugs. I'm fairly confident that most of my classmates should be able to defend themselves. They weren't the few chosen by the UA for nothing. While Izuku was confident in the abilities of his classmates, he was still anxious to get the rest of the class together. 13 seemed a bit relieved at his words. Suddenly, Izuku was struck by fear. Mina, is Mina here? Everything in his mind was outshined by his concern for the I'm here, Izuku-in. Thanks for the save, by the way. Izuku sighed in relief. She seemed much better than the moment before he disappeared. Izuku saw a few snickers from his fellow classmates and became bright red when he realized his outburst. Luckily, a distraction came when 13 spoke up. Ida-san, quickly run to the school. Alert them to the attack so we can get support. Someone is still interfering with our communications. Everyone quickly got serious at 13's words, and Ida spoke up. Yes, sensei. Everyone, please hold on. I'll be back with help. Tenya quickly used his quirk and ran towards the closed entrance. Izuku quickly came behind him. I'll get that for you, Tenya-san. Tenya nodded and slowed down enough for Izuku to get in front of him. Izuku then formed a small blue sphere above his palm. As they neared the door, Rasengan, he blew the doors right off their hinges, and Tenya took off at full speed towards the school. Izuku then gathered with his class, and 13, alright, you all should gather outside and see if you can contact the school from there. The faster the school is notified, the better. 13 was about to speak, but Mina beat him to it. What do you mean, you all? You're coming with us, Izuku? Izuku looked at Mina sadly. I'm sorry, Mina, but I can't leave Aizawa-sensei or the rest of the students here with all of these villains. It's best if I stay on my own to support them. 13-sensei doesn't have a quirk suited for combat, as this could prove to be deadly if used on people. Also, if those other two villains are as strong as I think they are, we can't afford to have them beat us all and take us hostage. Please, just go and try and contact the school. I can't fight to the best of my abilities if I know you're in danger. Mina gained a bit of color in her cheeks, as it was clear that her safety outweighed that of everyone else in Izuku's mind. But, before she could continue, everyone heard the sound of Aizawa's scream coming from where he'd been battling the villains. Izuku acted immediately, sending lightning chakra throughout his limbs as he bolted towards his teacher. When he reached the battlefield, he was stunned by what he saw. Dozens of villains laid unconscious on the ground, others groaning in pain, but clearly out of commission. However, what shocked him was Aizawa, pinned on the ground by the hulking purple villain, both of his arms broken, and his face bleeding after being slammed into the ground. Izuku gritted his teeth and rushed at the bird brain at full speed. He built up by using as much chakra as he could contain within it without losing control. Bird brain looked at him curiously once he was 3 feet away. Izuku then thrust his palm forward once he was in striking range. Rasengan. Izuku aimed slightly upward to avoid Aizawa. The resulting explosion shook the entire USJ facility, as the bird brain was blocked out of view from the erupting energy of the technique. Once the technique died down, and the dust cleared, Izuku saw that bird brain was no longer pinning Aizawa. Did I get him? Kurama's voice boomed in his mind, and Kit got down. Izuku did, as he was told without thinking, as he dived forward. He immediately felt a rush of wind by his head where he had just been standing. He quickly rolled into the dive and got on his feet, whipping his head around. As he did, fear gripped Izuku when he saw the bird's brain had made a grab towards Izuku. What was worse was that he didn't appear to have a scratch on him. How? I hit him dead on with my most powerful weapon. He doesn't even look like it bothered him. Kurama was starting to panic as well, not only that, his speed rivals that of All Might-san. I barely detected him until he was already there. A bone-chilling thought crept into Izuku's mind. They said they came here for All Might. They clearly planned this out fairly thoroughly. This guy's speed and durability seemed to match All Might, so it wouldn't be a stretch to say he's likely very strong considering his build. Is it possible that this guy is strong enough to fight All Might? Is anyone capable of fighting him? Kurama saw the situation getting more bleak with every passing moment. Unfortunately, I'd say your prediction is looking more realistic the more we learn. Either way, this isn't an enemy you can fight with. I suggest you create an opening to grab Aizawa and run. I can warn you in time for one of his hits, but if he follows with another at that speed you won't be able to dodge a second time. Izuku nodded, as he began to rack his mind for a plan. Hand-Face soon broke up his thoughts, as he spoke up. Hey, I know you. I used to call you Greenie because of your hair. Izuku looked at him confused, but decided conversation would be a good way to stall for time. How would you know me? I'm pretty sure I'd remember a mop of blue hair like that. Hand-Face began to scratch his chin, as he thought, what was it again? I know it started with an I. Indra? Itachi? Himoichi, I remember. Izuku, right. Izuku was shocked that the villain did indeed know him, considering they didn't even know any of the quirks of his classmates. How the hell do you know me? I'm positive I don't know you. Hand-Face simply shrugged. I remember your face in Sensei's files. He always had me go over them, as punishment when I didn't listen to him. Yours was pretty old though. I didn't care for most of them, but your hair was cool, so I nicknamed you Greenie. It reminded me of a game protagonist. Izuku was more confused after the explanation. Sensei? A file on me? Why would you have a file on me? And is this sensei of yours the one who ordered the attack on us? Hand-Face just shrugged lazily. Sensei's my boss. He told me All Might's been getting weaker, so this was our chance to kill him. And your file? Sensei keeps a file on everything. He is super into organizing things and stuff. And weren't you supposed to be quirkless? Guess you were a late bloomer. Too bad your mommy died because of it. At this, Izuku froze, his concern for anything else completely gone. What are you talking about? Hand-Face calmly replied. Your mom died, didn't she? Your file said something about you being a target, or whatever. But instead of you, your mom died instead. Izuku felt the world spinning. His mother was killed by some random villain. Her killer was gone. End of story. But hadn't she been acting strange that night? And that villain? He was looking for a quirkless boy. For him. As Izuku was about to question Hand-Face, he was cut off by the villain. Hey, where's Kurojiri? He should have handled those students by now. He then turned towards the massive purple villain who hadn't moved throughout the conversation. Nomu, go find Kurojiri and bring him here. Without a word, the bird brain, now known as Nomu, disappeared in a blur. After a moment, he returned with the unconscious body of the teleporter Izuku had taken down. Hand-Face seemed interested in the state of his partner. He was beaten. You students are tougher than I thought. Izuku looked up towards the entrance where he'd left the teleporter, and was horrified to see his classmates still there, frantically looking around for the villain. He got to them in a second. I couldn't even react before he moved. If he really is as powerful as All Might, he could have taken them all in an instant before I could even get there. Izuku panicked, as even escape didn't seem like much of an option anymore. Hand-Faces spoke up again. These students are interesting. Still, I wonder how All Might would react seeing all of his precious little students slaughtered when he gets here. He began to giggle like a maniac. It'd probably tear him up inside. At those words, Izuku's head went down, his hair covering his eyes, his fists clenched tight. At that moment, all he could imagine was the lifeless bodies of his class and teachers. He saw Mina's lifeless eyes. Her last thought was wondering why he hadn't saved her. Something in the was beginning to snap. A red aura was beginning to leak out of him. What the fuck are you talking about? I'm gonna have Nomu kill all of those students. That way All Might knows that he failed to protect them. Nothing personal. Izuku began to shake with rage. You're not gonna fucking touch any of them. Not you, or that purple motherfucker. I'll rip you to pieces before you can try. Hand-Face just laughed. You may be strong, Greenie, but Nomu here was made to take All Might at 100%. Tell you what, I'll let you join us at the League of Villains. We could use someone like you. Of course, your classmates need to die, but you can blame that fraud All Might for not being here. What do you say? What should I say? I say that I don't give a fuck how strong that fucker is. Stay away from them. With that, Izuku's power erupted, as red chakra surrounded him. He began to scream, as he raised it higher and higher. Wind whipped around them, as the pressure from his power was growing higher and higher. A few cracks formed in the ground at Izuku's feet. Handface seemed to be surprised at Izuku's display of power. Cool, maybe you're not as low level as I thought. Nomu, why don't you play with Greenie here? Nomu heard the command and began to walk towards Izuku. Izuku's hair began to become more wild and feral. His whisker marks became more pronounced. His claws grew on his hands, as well as a pair of animal-like fangs. As he looked up in rage at Nomu, he revealed that his eyes had turned from green to red with the same slit pupils as Kurama. With a roar, Izuku took off in a blur. A moment later, he appeared behind Nomu and delivered a powerful punch to his head. Nomu hardly budged, further increasing Izuku's rage. He dodged a backhand from Nomu and sped in front of him, throwing a barrage of punches and kicks at the behemoth's gut. Izuku realized that the brute's body wasn't as durable as All Might's, as he felt his strikes dig significantly deeper than they had when he was spared with All Might. He quickly ducked under a punch thrown by Nomu and kicked at his legs before dashing away to gain some distance. Nomu had a few scuff marks on his body. Izuku's eyes widened when he saw them disappear until the villain looked good as new. Handface began to laugh. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention, Nomu has a Regan quirk. Even if you could do some real damage, it wouldn't matter. Izuku growled in frustration. Even if he could keep at it for days, he'd never make any real progress faced with a quirk like that. He decided he needed to step up his attacks a bit more. He quickly weaved a few hand signs and began to inhale, water style, pressure stream. A thin, but powerful stream of water exited Izuku's mouth, heading straight for Nomu, who made no movements. The attack hit its mark right in Mom's stomach, and Izuku immediately added chakra to increase the force of the water. After a moment of the water bouncing off of Nomu, the villain seemed to feel something. As he looked down, Izuku was forced to release them, as he simply intended to test a hunch with the attack. Looking at where Nomu had been hit, Izuku and Handface saw a puncture in his skin healing up. Izuku was right. Nomu's skin wasn't as impenetrable as All Might's. He likely made up for this fact with his regeneration quirk. Handface seemed surprised that Izuku's attack had done actual damage. Wow, that move was so cool. I didn't think anyone other than All Might would be able to hurt Nomu. He then turned to the giant. Defend yourself a bit this time around, Nomu. Greenie here's just full of surprises. Nomu turned his full attention towards Izuku, his arms raised slightly this time. Izuku simply growled, baring his fangs. Even through his rage-induced state, he began to formulate a plan. He just had one more thing to test. Disappearing in another blur of speed, he appeared behind Nomu before speeding off and reappearing in front of the villain. He made a swipe at Nomu with his claws. Nomu easily saw the attack and put his arm in Izuku's path. Izuku followed through with the swipe, focusing a bit of chakra into his claws. His claws scraped across Nomu's skin, leaving a few shallow cuts on the villain's arms. He then leapt back again, dodging a lazy strike from Nomu. He then began to form hand signs again, a plan of attack in his mind. He slammed his palms on the ground, earth-style, earth wall. 4 walls sprung from the ground, forming a box around the purple villain. In the next moment, the walls exploded outwards, as Nomu smashed them to pieces. Izuku, who'd already begun to form more hand seals, inhaled deeply. Wind style, gale force level 1. He released the wind, purposely spreading it out, as it swept up the dust in the area, as well as that created when Nomu destroyed the earth walls. The area was soon covered in dust, making it impossible to see anything. Handface was curious as to what he was trying to accomplish. Nomu. The dust was completely blown away after one swipe from Nomu's hand. However, the makeshift smoke screen already served its purpose, as Izuku was already a few feet away from Nomu, fully formed in his hand. Nomu barely got his arm in the way to defend before Izuku thrust his non-hand at him, chakra-enhanced claws at the ready. Izuku's claws had a bit more chakra in them, and managed to make a slightly larger cut. He then aimed directly at the cut, Rasengan. They exploded with full force on impact with Nomu's arm. Then, the unexpected happened, as his arm convulsed, as if his inner arm was trying to escape his skin. In the next moment, his arm erupted, muscles and tendons flying away. Nomu was then left with a stump instead of a right arm. Izuku leapt away, and on the ground, as he panted. His appearance returned back to normal, as he'd used the remainder of Kurama's chakra in the last attack. He looked up, and smirked at how his attack had more or less done what he'd intended, although he'd hoped he would have gotten Nemo's upper body instead. Unfortunately, the victory was short-lived, as the arm began to regrow until it appeared as though Nomu had never lost an arm in the first place. Izuku cursed inwardly. Shit. So it was all for nothing in the end. I don't suppose you could lend me any more chakra, could you? Kurama was more shocked at what had just transpired, but recomposed himself, as he answered, No, I'm sorry, Kit. Another burst like that, and you risk frying your chakra points. I doubt you'd last long enough to make the chakra boost worth it. Izuku chuckled at the expected response. Well, it was worth asking. Sorry you got stuck with an idiot like me for a partner, and thanks for being here with me through everything up until now. Kurama sighed, as death seemed imminent. Don't apologize for it. It's been my pleasure. Even though you are an idiot sometimes, I only regret it all has to end here. Izuku smiled, and closed his eyes, as he prepared a hand face to order Nomu to kill him. However, luck was on Izuku's side, as he felt someone grab him followed by a rush of wind. He opened his eyes, and felt immense relief when he saw the familiar glint of his teacher's hero smile. All Might Sensei. Izuku wasn't sure if he should be relieved that he was there or smack him on the head for not being there earlier. Take a break, young Midoriya. You've done well, that much I can tell. I will take it from here. All Might prepared to face the villains, as he put Izuku down. Izuku quickly stopped him. Hold on, Sensei. This isn't a fight that even you can win easily. The big one is called Nomu. From what I could tell, his speed and strength are likely on par with your own. He isn't as durable, but he has a regeneration quirk to compensate. If possible, I would like to ask that you find the rest of the students in the facility and bring them here. I might have a way to beat him. All Might seemed surprised at Izuku's statement regarding the abilities of the villain. However, he didn't take the analysis lightly, as Izuku knew how powerful he was from all of their training. He nodded before speeding off. After a few seconds, the missing students began to appear with Izuku and the rest of Class 1A by the entrance. As All Might dropped them off, Izuku noticed that he retrieved Aizawa's unconscious body when he'd grabbed him. Once they were all there, Izuku stood up and gave a nod to his teacher. Thank you, All Might Sensei. I have an idea, but need a minute to prepare it. Do you think you can hold them off for a bit? All Might gave Izuku his signature hero smile. Of course, young Midoriya. I will put my trust in this plan of yours. He then went off to face the villains. As Izuku prepared to tell his classmates his plans, he was tackled into a hug by Mina. Izuku, you idiot. What the hell were you thinking fighting those two on your own like that? You could have been killed. He heard sniffles, and realized that she was crying into his shoulder. Izuku was startled by Mina's words and actions, but soon felt terrible for making her worry. He slowly returned the embrace, wrapping his arms around it. I'm so sorry, Mina. I didn't mean to make you worry like that. I just couldn't bear the thought of you being in danger because you went to fight with me. If you'd have gotten hurt, I don't know what I would do. They separated, and Izuku wiped a tear that was making its way down Mina's face. Before they could say anything else, the sound of someone clearing their throat could be heard, and they turned to see the rest of their class looking at them. They immediately let go of each other, and looked away, as color filled their cheeks. Izuku was the first to recover, as he coughed into his hand, and began to speak. All right, guys. After fighting that big purple guy, I realized that he might be powerful enough to go head-to-head with All Might Sensei. That being the case, I've come up with a plan so we can help him. Mineta was the first to speak up. Come on, Midoriya. Just because he was stronger than you doesn't make him as strong as All Might. I think you gotta screw loose after your fight. The whole class was suddenly hit with a strong gust of wind coming from where the villains and All Might were facing off. Most of their jaws dropped when they saw All Might and Nomu trading blows. Each of their punches released another blast of wind. They all turned their attention back to Izuku, and Mineta spoke again. Please continue. Izuku wasted no time getting into his plan. Okay, I need Kashimura-san, Todoroki-san, and Bakugo. Kirishima Ejiro, a spiky red-haired student with a hardening quirk, Todoroki Shoto, the white and red-haired student with the ice and fire quirk, and Bakugo stepped forward. The latter clearly did so more grudgingly. He was glad to see that they seemed to be unhurt. Kirishima-san, we'll need your hardening quirk, and the enhanced strength it gives you. Bakugo, I've had a hunch that those grenade gauntlets of yours are more than just for show considering they have a usable pin in them. Kirishima nodded, a serious look on his face. Bakugo simply humphed as he scowled. Izuku then looked at Shoto, who was as emotionless as ever. Todoroki-san, I'll need you to be at the ready with your ice quirk. Be sure to focus your ice on the purple guy once you use it. Shoto nodded, inwardly impressed at Izuku's leadership skills. Here's the plan. First, All Might Sensei will. All Might and Nomu were trading blows back and forth, either able to get a clear advantage. All Might soon realized that the blue-haired villain was the one in charge. There was a purple smoke villain unconscious by his feet. All Might was honestly impressed that Nomu was able to keep up with him, and more shocked that he apparently had multiple quirks. He was also worried. This Nomu could easily be the first of many that his arch-nemesis would create. If that were to happen, All Might Sensei, Izuku shouted towards his teacher, as Kirishima, Shoto, and Bakugo followed behind him. All Might then sent a hard punch into Mom's chest and leapt backwards to meet with his students. Nomu seemed to mind, as he leapt towards Hand Face. All Might made sure to keep his eyes trained on the villains. So, is this plan of yours ready for young Midoriya? Izuku steeled his nerves, as he watched the villains. Yeah? I don't really have time to explain. but I need you to trust me. Let's get into position, guys." The other 3 students nodded as they went to their respective places on the battlefield. The villains paid them no mind, as they were focused solely on All Might. Izuku also kept his eyes on the villains as he spoke. "Sensei, I need you to create an opening in Nomu's defense. I need a clear shot at his torso. As soon as you do, get to me at your top speed. I'll be ready when you do. At the same time, I need you to give Bakugo and Kirishima-san a signal. Make sure you time your attack with Bakugo's." All Might nodded. "I trust your judgment, young Midoriya. However, please be careful." Izuku nodded reassuringly to All Might, fully knowing that he wasn't likely to escape unscathed. "Don't worry, I should be able to get away in time." All Might rushed at Nomu, who did the same. They renewed their punching battle, the ground shaking, and winds whipping around. Izuku channeled the rest of his chakra, and held his palm outwards, his other hand gripping his forearm. As he did so, he began to form his attack and, after a moment, his whole hand began to light up with blue electricity. After a few moments, his entire hand was sparking with crackling electricity. It was releasing so much power that a screeching noise was being created once it was completed. Izuku concentrated as much chakra as he could and stood at the ready. After a moment, All Might found his moment. He swiped up both of Nomu's arms with as much force as he could, leaving the villain's torso exposed. "Now," he then rushed over to Izuku, whose only words were, "Throw me." All Might thought his successor had lost his mind, but, true to his word, trusted him, and threw the boy straight at Nomu with as much force as he could. Izuku soared right at Nomu's exposed stomach, and thrust his right at him. Lightning blade. Izuku's attack made contact, and completely sunk into Nomu's body before a blast of lightning came out of the villain's back. Izuku then yelled, as loud as he could, "Do it!" That was all Izuku could get out before his body was met with a backhand from Nomu. Izuku's body went flying like a rag doll, as he was sent flying to the other side of the USJ, his body hitting multiple buildings and going out of sight with a violent crash. All Might resisted every fiber in his body to go, and rushed towards his protege, and focused on Nomu, who was in the process of recovering from the massive hole in his stomach. The villain didn't notice Bakugo coming up behind him. The blonde had been thrown by Kirishima. All Might saw the student's intentions, and rushed at Nomu, cocking his fist back in preparation for a massive punch. Following the plan, All Might timed his punch with Bakugo, who was within a meter of Nomu, and had pulled the pin from his right gauntlet. As the massive explosion came from Bakugo's gauntlet, All Might threw his fist forward, Texas Smash. Both Bakugo's explosion and All Might's punch impacted the hole in Nomu at the same time. Without his skin to protect him, Nomu's insides were completely vulnerable to both attacks. Much like with Izuku's earlier, this caused the villain's body to convulse before it erupted, separating his upper and lower body. Todoroki then played his part, as he immediately froze both parts, thus preventing Nomu from regenerating. Bakugo had been blown back, but was caught by Kirishima. All Might was panting heavily, as his fight with Nomu had been one of his most intense battles to date. Handface was busy gripping his head in frustration, and scratching at his neck. No. This wasn't supposed to happen. Those low levels weren't supposed to interfere. All Might should be dead. All Might then turned to Handface. "Surrender. Do so without resistance, and you won't be hurt. You've lost." Handface growled in frustration before kicking Kurojire's still unconscious body. "Get the fuck up, Kurojire. How much longer are you gonna be napping?" Kurojire groaned before he slowly began to lift himself off the ground, his purple smoke rising up until all that could be seen of him was his glowing yellow eyes. What happened? Where are those brats from earlier?" Handface growled. "Hurry up, and get us out of here." Nomu was beaten. Kurojire seemed shocked at the news, and looked around at the battlefield. After a moment, he quickly opened a portal behind them both, and they disappeared within it. All Might had rushed forward when he realized that it was a portal, but was a moment too late, as it closed as soon as they entered. "Damn, I didn't realize that one was a teleporter." All Might looked towards the USJ entrance, and saw that the rest of Class 1A had come down once the villains had been defeated, nearly all of them cheering and shouting praise. "Wow, you guys won! All Might Sensei are the strongest. Did you see Bakugo's explosion?" After a moment, a new voice was heard, as Mina, Tenya, and Achiko hadn't been among the cheering. They'd been looking around for their green-haired friend. Mina was the first to voice her concerns. "Wait, where's Izuku?" All Might cursed himself, as he had forgotten the vicious blow his successor had taken by Nomu. He immediately sped off to where Izuku's body was last seen flying. He was met with a sight that nearly broke him. On the floor lay Izuku. He had smashed into the wall of the USJ, leaving cracks in it. He'd managed to prop himself up slightly on the wall. His right arm was snapped in half at the forearm, while the other one appeared to be dislocated. His left leg was also broken very badly. His hero suit was scuffed up and torn in several places. His face was covered in cuts and bruises, and his left eye was swollen shut. He also had a line of blood running down the side of his face from a cut on his head. He appeared to be conscious, but he had little sense of what was going around him, as he simply struggled to stay conscious. He'd spit out a large amount of blood on his chest, and even more was coming out of his mouth as he coughed. All Might managed to snap out of his shock, and knelt next to his student, Midoriya. "You're going to be fine. I'm going to get you to Recovery Girl, and she will heal you right away." Izuku looked at All Might with his one good eye, and managed a small nod. All Might attempted to pick up Izuku, but stopped once he screamed in pain. All Might knew he had to get Izuku to the Recovery Girl as soon as possible, but his pain screams were too much. Right, as he steeled himself to lift Izuku regardless of the pain, he heard movement behind him. He saw that Tenya had carried Mina and Ochako to them. Ochako had used her quirk to lighten Mina and herself so Tenya could carry them without difficulty. All of them gasped at the sight of Izuku's broken body. Tenya stepped forward, his fist clenched. "Is he alive, sensei?" All Might nodded, as Ochako fell to her knees and cried. Mina quickly rushed over to Izuku's side before she knelt down and began to weep. She wanted to comfort him, but was too afraid that he would shatter at the slightest touch. Instead, she began to yell, "Izuku, why did you do that? You did that on purpose, didn't you? You put yourself in the most danger so nobody else had to do it. Why did it have to be you? Why? Don't you dare die. Stay with me, Izuku." She continued to weep her eyes out until she heard something. Izuku began to mumble something quietly. Mina tried to dull down her cries as she leaned in to listen. "What?" Izuku took a shaky breath. "And not cough going anywhere, still have our plans, cough tomorrow, no more cough crying." Mina brought her head back and looked at Izuku. He was looking at her as best he could with his one open eye. He had a reassuring smile on his lips. Mina wanted nothing more than to sob even harder. However, she did her best to hold it in for Izuku, as she gently held onto his hand and wiped some of the blood from his chin. All Might felt like a failure, as a hero when he saw his student still remaining strong with his body broken and beaten. Suddenly, he had an idea. "Miss Uraraka, use your quirk on Izuku." Quickly, Uraraka looked up from her crying and sniffed. She looked at All Might before nodding and rushing over to Izuku. She gently placed her palm on his shoulder and activated her quirk. She put enough power into it so he gently levitated into the air. Other than a few groans, he remained quiet. All Might was glad Ochako had been there. Now Izuku would be in less pain when he carried him back to the school. He then gave Ochako a thankful look. "Thank you very much. I'm going to take young Midoriya to Recovery Girls so his wounds can be healed." He gently placed Izuku in his arms and allowed Ochako to climb on his back so she could keep her quirk active. Mina quickly spoke up. "Wait, please take me with you, All Might sensei. Please." All Might wasted no time thinking, as he nodded. Mina climbed onto his back along with Ochako, and he sped off towards the school. Tenya snapped out of his trance and fired up his quirk to full power to run back to the school along with them. He stopped before leaving and yelled towards his class who was still by the field. "Izuku-san is in critical condition. All Might sensei is taking him to Recovery Girls so he can be treated." He then continued running towards the school, passing a few UA staff that had finally arrived at the scene. Most of the students were in shock at the news and felt ashamed that they hadn't been more concerned for their classmate. Izuku was vaguely aware that he was being carried by All Might and saw Ochako and Mina both peering their heads over his shoulders. He felt himself getting weaker by the second as he lost more blood. It hurt to breathe, as he felt most of his ribs had been broken. His eye began to close as he was slipping out of consciousness. Kurama was worried for his partner and desperately wished to take away his pain. "Sleep, kid. You're going to be fine. Rest, please." Izuku heard the obvious concern in Kurama's voice and may have poked fun at him had every nerve in his body not been on fire. He decided that sleep seemed pretty fantastic at the moment. He began to close his eyes and drift off. That last thing he saw before he lost consciousness was Mina. Her eyes were full of worry and pain, but she kept a strong face for him. She refused to let one more tear come out. Izuku didn't want her to cry. That's all there was to it. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.